Hi, my name is Sarah M. Anderson, and I'm here to talk about some great romance reads for your upcoming February romance readathon.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones. It is Saturday, February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day. And this week I thought it would be fun I put out the call. I said, who knows rom-coms or romances and wants to do a special Valentine's Day episode with me? And romance author Sarah M. Anderson raised her digital hand and we had a really fun talk. This is an introduction to all things romance books, Harlequin Publishing, and YA. So we talk about from erotic books to romance to all the different subgenres within romance. And it was a really interesting episode, very fun to talk to someone in Illinois who is a prolific author. So Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today. I have been enjoying my weeks in between chemotherapy and radiation. If you are new to the podcast, I was diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer this summer, did chemotherapy November, December, January. Tomorrow I go for my mapping to start radiation. So I'm sort of in this lull so I can heal from chemotherapy. Yesterday, my nephew and I went to thrift stores and Joann Fabrics, and I climbed the first 2 flights of stairs I've climbed in a couple months. And that meant I went to bed very early last night because I was really tired, but it was so fun to go to a Village discount and go look at everything under the sun with my nephew. So it was a really fun day, and I am glad that I finally invested in a cane. My lungs are recovering from chemotherapy. I thought that it's really interesting. Hollywood tells you that bad chemotherapy is when you're vomiting and you can't eat and you lose a ton of weight and you're really sickly. And because I felt car sick a couple times, but I was never nauseous or I never vomited. My appetite didn't suffer. My taste buds got wonky. So even though I was getting really tired and I was losing my breath, eventually by the end of chemotherapy, I couldn't go to my kitchen and living room quickly. I had to quit going to Pilates because I can't walk 2 blocks anymore. But somehow I thought because I was still able to eat, that I was doing fine. But my oncologist said last week that she rarely sees people with such significant side effects to chemotherapy as I had. So I'm glad I didn't know during chemo that I was having such a bad reaction to it. I don't know if emotionally I could have handled that, but the side effects are more than nausea and appetite. And so people told me this, and I told my doctors, I talked to everyone about the side effects I was having. But if you experience something like this, it's called activities of daily life. So when I finally said to the nurse practitioner, I can't fry an egg without running out of breath. I have to sit down because I'm so fatigued after frying an egg. Well, frying an egg isn't making risotto. It is a 5-minute tops stovetop activity. And so when I would say, I can't fry an egg, I can't go to my kitchen and back, and then realize I forgot my coffee and go back, I'm like, well, I guess I'm just drinking water today because I can't get to my coffee again. That was when ultimately they decided to stop my chemotherapy early. So share the side effects if you're having them, and take all the naps you need. Take the time off of work that you can afford to take off, and take all the naps you need. So this week I do my radiation mapping. I get those radiation tattoos so they can focus the lasers or whatever. I think that's a scientific medical phrase. And then I do a pulmonary function test because everyone's very concerned about my lungs, but I've started a new round of steroids. And so my lungs are much stronger also than they were 3 weeks ago. So with all that said, celebrate Valentine's Day with author Sarah M. Anderson and the dozen or so authors she recommends, from YA romance, YA queer romances, spicy erotica. Like, it's the whole spectrum of romance. And I think you'll really enjoy this. You'll enjoy learning about the industry of romance writing. We talk about cozy mysteries. We talk about Bunnicula. It's just a fun one all around. Wear your mask, wash your hands, get your booster, and keep enjoying your favorite things. Welcome to Finding Favorites, the podcast. I just recorded an episode of my candy podcast, and I started to say where candy isn't just a treat, it's the main event, which is fun. But this podcast, Finding Favorites, is where we get recommendations without using an algorithm. This week, I am back in the saddle after taking January off. And I asked my sister, I asked the internet, which is the same as asking my twin sister, who should I interview for Valentine's Day? Who likes rom-coms? Who likes romances? Who has an opinion that would be fun to hear on Valentine's Day? And my sister tweeted me right away and said, you got to talk to Sarah Anderson, Sarah M. Anderson. So I am here tonight with Sarah M. Anderson, who is an author and educator. She lives downstate, and this is her very first podcast interview. So Sarah, welcome to the Podcastiverse.
Thank you. Be gentle.
I will be gentle.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for putting the M in there, because when you have the 20th most common woman's first name and you marry the man with the 6th most common last name, good Lord, do you know how many Sarah Andersons there are in the world?
I imagine there are thousands.
There's like 5 in this town alone, and it is not a big town.
Yeah. So Rain, who's my twin sister, who you know online as at DeVivo.
Yeah.
When we were growing up, Rain is her middle name.
Ah.
When we were growing up, she was Jenny Jones.
Those were the days.
Those were the days. And it is when Jenny Jones had her TV show. She was obviously just named Jennifer, as most girls were in 1977.
Yes, they were.
Yeah. And then Leah was not common in 1977, but my middle name, Marie. Leah, are you also a Sarah Marie? Are you a Marie?
I am a Sarah Margaret, but one sister's middle name is Marie and the other sister's first name is Leah. So yeah, that is, and I'm 76 and they're 78. So yep. I think there were like 7 Sarahs and 8 Jennifers and then maybe 5 Heathers in my middle school. So it was just an all-out battle royale of, we didn't have Brittany's or Paris's. We had Jennifers and Sarahs.
Jennifers and Sarahs and Heathers. Absolutely. So I'm so pleased that you're here tonight.
I'm thrilled.
You are an author and I've interviewed a number of authors, but I have never interviewed anyone who I just had to keep scrolling to see all their books. You are a prolific author.
Yeah, I've been seeking treatment, but nothing seems to work. It's a problem. It's been really interesting being online with the younger generation, and now I'm old, so I get to say stuff like that. It's awful.
Yes, we are Gen Xers, and
yes,
yeah,
it's very interesting. My sisters are 2.5 years younger than I am, and I consider myself the youngest of the Gen X, but they're the elder millennials, and that's because they had cell phones before I did. I didn't get a cell phone until I was 25. I didn't know what the web was until I was a sophomore in college, but they went to a different high school than I did. So like they had more access to, it's like, it's not a year, it's a digital divide.
It's absolutely a digital divide.
Where were we? But books. So
books, you are a prolific writer and you see the young writers on the internet today.
And sometimes they talk about how they're all like neurodivergent, and I'm like, wait, am I ADD? Does that explain the constant talking in my head that never shuts up and why I have to write it all down? Is that just one of my coping mechanisms, maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah, it could be. Because I do have mild OCD, and I always joke. I'm like, yeah, no, that's how you are. That's how you write this many books in that short a period of time. I think it's like 47 or 8. I lost count.
Tremendous.
In a 10-year span, and you're like, yeah, well, they never stop talking in my head. So that is the best way. Also, giving yourself carpal tunnel syndrome is a great way to get that many books done.
No.
Yeah, no, it's.
Were you doing any of it longhand, or is it mouse carpal tunnel?
It was all mouse. My brain moves too fast for longhand. I know there are people who enjoy that, but I did spend about a year and a half when my hands were really bad doing dictation, and it wasn't bad. It's just that I would say a line and then immediately think of something better, and doing dictation, it's harder, so it's honestly faster just to type sometimes, although the spelling has not improved. So the spelling is still terrible.
Wow. So how did now I was reading your bio, and
mostly accurate.
Your mostly accurate bio that talked about, I love that you name check Bunnicula in your bio.
Oh yeah.
Which was a bunny vampire book, right? It was rabbits and vampires?
Yeah, well, it was a story about the bunny. Bunnicula is a side character, although a great title. The actual story is about Chester, and Chester was the cat. What's the dog's name? The dog is the one who tells the story. It's about this dog and a cat, and the family adopts a bunny who drains vegetables of their juices. So he's not coming at your but the cat is hysterical in all senses of the word, and the dog is just he just wants everyone to get along. And so one of the things that I did, because even writing adult romance, you want to build readers. So from the time my kid was in kindergarten until he moved to junior high, which is 6th grade here. So from kindergarten through the end of 5th grade, once a week I went into every single one of his classes and I read stories. And 4th grade was the entire Bunnicula series.
Wow.
With all of the voices. And when you do them back to back to back, you really sink into the voices.
Yeah.
And so the kids just loved them, because you have to, my whole thing is, if you raise readers early, then once they get old enough, then they can buy my books. That's fine.
Yeah.
Start them early, kids. So we would have fun. I'd go in. I always did voices, but the teachers also loved it, because I would also really just, I remember specifically for Bunnicula, at one point, Chester the cat says, I read in this encyclopedia, that's how old these books are, but I read in the encyclopedia that you have to put a stake through the heart. And when you're reading this book out loud, the joke is kind of lost, but he goes and he gets a T-bone, and he's just tenderizing the steak on the stomach of the sleeping rabbit. And the kids, and I'm dying at the front of the room. And the kids are like, what's so funny? And so I'm like, let's learn about homophones. And the teacher's head pops up and she's like, yes, let's learn about homophones. We were going to do that next week, but now is great. So we're learning about steaks versus steaks. And then they're like, oh, that joke is funny. That cat's very silly. I'm like, that cat is ridiculous.
That cat had a little bit more Amelia Bedelia to it than I think I realized.
Oh, I know. And then in the 3rd book, they adopt a dachshund who won't stop howling. So of course they name him Howie. And, it's just classic children's silly animal stories.
Yeah.
It never really gets old.
It was such a, the cover, the vibe of the cover of Bunnicula is so ingrained in my head. And maybe I'm getting it a little confused with Rats of Nim, which was so scary. Yeah. Because Bunnicula is not scary. And Rats of Nim, terrifying.
Yes. Yes, it is. Bunnicula, I always thought was especially for my son, who is now 16 and looms over me at 6'4", and I'm like, where, how, why? But I always thought Bunnicula was a good gateway drug into R.L. Stine. There's a progression for these things, and he would definitely then we went to R.L. Stine. You know, that Goosebumps movie, the first live action one that came out with Jack Black, it was so funny. We went to see it in the theater, and there was a line, you know, where the sidekick character is like, you said something about how you wish you could be Steve King, and Jack Black, as R.L. Stein's character, whipped around, Steve King wishes he had my sales. And now, is that international or domestic? And nobody else in the theater laughed, but my son and I were about to fall off the chairs onto the floor, because it was like, yep, that's exactly what we actually do sound like. We talk like that all the time. International or domestic. Yeah.
It's amazing. So so in the course of 10 years, you wrote over 40 books, primarily adult romance?
Yeah. Yes.
How did you find out that you wanted to try writing adult romance?
This is a long, complicated story.
I love long, complicated stories.
That begins with me, obviously. If it started with someone else, it'd be an entirely different story. But no, I was going to be a professor of Victorian literature.
All right.
And I went and I got my master's degree, and it became pretty clear that I was not actually going to be a professor of Victorian literature.
There aren't as many of those positions open.
No.
As they might have led you to believe before grad school.
No. The classic point where I realized that I was not going to succeed in academia was where I was sitting in a class, we were discussing a modern day South African retelling of Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe with Friday.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Work with me here.
Yeah.
And they were going on and on and on about the symbolism of the Friday character having his tongue cut out. And I raised my hand in the class and I said, tell me where in the text it says that he's had his tongue cut out. And the professor looked at me and he said, you're such a literalist. And it was not a compliment.
Ooh.
And I thought, okay, I may not really fit in here. But I came from a very academic perspective of where you had to prove that you were not like other girls. You had to be better. You had to fit in. The entire department of that university was like, let's all talk about Lolita. Wow. That was their idea of a love story.
Gross. No, thank
awful.
you.
Yeah. And so I came from a place where I was just, romance was something that was denigrated, and it was just not something that was embraced. It was trash. It was trash. It was trash. And I came from a family that was very, very into reading. Yeah. But my parents are mystery. They live in mystery. Ellery Queen and Neora Wolf, and when Ivanovich came out, my mom was like, oh. Now if it's got an animal, a food product, and death in the title, then
your mom's all over it.
My mom is all over it. She also accepts crafts. It doesn't have to have food, but crafting is all right. But yeah, that's what it's got to have a cute animal and some form of death into the title. And she's there.
I think she'll like my friend Galit's book, which is like recipes.
Oh yes,
and
she doesn't cook, but she loves to read about food.
G.P. Gottlieb is her writing name, and Battered, a whipped and sipped mystery.
Oh, that does sound about right.
And she's got 2 of them published so far. But I went to her book launch, and they served the recipes that she featured in the book.
Nice.
So, yes.
The advantages of cozies are...
Yeah.
So I didn't come from romance at all. It was just completely foreign to me. And so this is the true story. So grad school just burned me out on reading. I didn't pick up a book for another 7 years. I would still read like newspaper articles, magazine articles, but really short, concise humor columns. nothing that was, 200 pages or more. Then I had my son, and my brain didn't work at all for about 9 months. It was a long journey back to thinking. And so he was about 2.5, had gotten tubes in his ears, was finally starting to sleep through the night. My brain was finally starting to heal, honestly.
Yeah.
Heal. And we had gone down.
Sleep deprivation.
Oh my God.
Of early parenthood is torture.
He did not sleep.
Yeah.
For 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So we had gone down to visit some friends at Lake of the Ozarks, and I had my 2.5-year-old and my 92.5-year-old grandmother in the car on the way back. And when you have a small child, you time car trips around naps.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the law. And my grandmother was not going to take a nap; she was resting her eyes. And
of course.
I didn't even want to play the radio.
Yeah.
I did not want to disturb the tranquility, because you'd never know sometimes when the radio was on, you'd think she was out, and then all of a sudden she'd be talking to you about it. Scare the hell out of you.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have the radio on. So to make sure that I stayed awake, I did something I drank something I drink like once a decade. I had a Mountain Dew. I have no tolerance for Mountain Dew.
Okay.
Just to make sure. And so on the drive home, I'm like, gotta stay awake. And my brain is twirling around these two people who were having this argument in the rain, and they were really mad, and it was really raining. And then they kissed, and I was like, well, that's really interesting. And this is not uncommon. I always have ideas that like float in and then float out. I always envision my brain as a constantly moving stream, and sometimes it moves really fast. But like a week later, they were still arguing. They wouldn't leave me alone. And I was like, maybe if I write them down, they'll leave me alone. And the next thing I knew, I'd written like 500 pages of what my brain was very sure was the great American novel.
Wow.
It was not the great American novel. My mommy was very nice to me about it.
Aww.
But Oprah was never going to have me on. I mean, the story didn't even get started until like page 200. It turns out that I have a crippling addiction to backstory. I'm like, well, yep, that's very interesting. The interesting part is the people arguing and kissing in the rain. But let's go back to what happened to when she was 6. And I wish I was exaggerating. But I really did originally start the story when she was 6 and then move forward because people cared.
Right.
No, they did not.
No.
But it was fun.
Drop people into the action.
I have no idea what I'm doing. But I wrote this book and I was convinced it was great. And then through, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And I looked around, I was like, how do I publish this masterpiece? And lo and behold, the Chicago North, what was the Romance Writers of America and is now just the Chicago North Romance Writers Group. They were having their biannual Spring Fling conference coming up very soon. So I met people like Blythe Gifford and Joelle Charbonnet, who Joelle is still my mentor as I move over to writing YA. That's where she is now, but she started in Cozy Mysteries. I went to Blythe's first session and I went, oh, you mean I should probably start where the action does? Oh, I embarrassed myself by trying to talk Shakespeare with Eloisa James in line at the restroom. I mean, I feel like it's not quite as great as throwing a book over the stall door at an agent, but it felt like, because, she's a Shakespearean scholar and I had just, recently escaped academia. I was like, oh yeah, I can do this.
Yeah.
Like so many newbie mistakes. I've made many, many of them. But I was like, that whole time I was like, yeah, no, I'm not writing romance. I'm just here for, knowledge purposes. But then, I worked on this book and, I tried to save it. But, I started cutting away. I'm like, well, what's left is two people falling in love. Wait. Is this a romance? And then because I enjoy pain, it was like this sprawling family saga. So then I started writing their daughter's story, and that was way more of a romance. And then the granddaughter's story was just a straight up romance. And I was like, wait, I am writing romance. What the hell?
And you're writing about intergenerational family stuff. You're getting family trees. I saw on your website that you write Western romances.
Oh, yeah, there was a lot.
So,
I mean, who doesn't love a man in chaps?
Yeah.
I do. So yeah, so I just kept writing. Those first books were, I mean, and I say this with all sincerity, simply god awful. They were terrible books, but every book that I wrote got demonstratively better. Every book improved, and that's why even now I'll tell people, they're like, some books can't be saved. Those first couple of books could not. Maybe I could still take the idea and rewrite it completely.
Right.
But some books can't be saved. Sometimes you have to just take the lessons that you found working on that and apply them to the next book.
Right.
You have to keep going and keep growing. And that turns out to be my secret superpower, that and, sheer volume of production and also talking. But just, moving forward and learning and incorporating, my editor always really appreciated, because I also write very long. I don't just write a lot. I write a lot. So the Harlequin Desires were supposed to be somewhere between 45 and 55,000 words. And that would kind of change by 5,000 words every so often. So at one point they dropped 45 to 50 and I turned in a 70,000 word book.
Ooh.
And I was like, help.
Right. That is why editors exist on the planet.
And she said, don't worry about it. I'd always rather cut than I would be like, could you please add more somewhere?
Right.
And so, once you do that a couple of times, then I started to, I learned I'm like, okay, well, this is the sort of stuff she cuts. I'll just go ahead and do that now and save us all the trouble down the line. So I still write long, but even when I'm editing now, I still take those lessons and it's a bloodbath. I just, so much. Oh, it's terrible.
So other than the parts where you write about their kindergarten teacher, what are the other parts you've learned that to take out before they get to your editor?
I repeat myself. There's a lot of repetition, so the repeating of the repetition has to be deleted.
Okay.
I chronically start sentences with "and then," "she just." And so everybody has a just problem. It's not unique to me, but I really, really lean into the and then, see? And then the em dashes and the ellipses, there's, I've literally had some copy editors who are like, I'm holding you to 3 a page. Figure out which ones you want. And then use some periods or a comma. Or maybe some italics. So sometimes when I go back through, I'm like, holy mother of pearl. That is excessive by any reasonable standard. Yep. But a lot of times I will, and you can't see it when you're in it. You have to come back to it. But I won't repeat words or phrases necessarily, but I'll repeat concepts and then I'll just wait, isn't that pretty much what I said a paragraph and a half ago? Which one's better? And then you get to cut most of a paragraph and you're like, yay! So
nice.
It helps. So I kind of fell into Desire by accident. My agent at the time suggested trying to write for Harlequin, and I just happened to have had, and that was a man of his word. I happened to have an idea. The funny story is that I had written a rodeo book that was Rodeo Dreams was the title it eventually became. And it had gone around and it had got a really nice rejection from an editor at Harlequin. And so when I wrote this next book, she had just been promoted to be the senior editor of Desire. And she remembered the rodeo book. And so she gave that a read and she said, yeah, I think I can fix this to make it a Desire book. And so that was Stacy Boyd at Desire. And we had a very productive 10 years where we just yep, let's make it roll. And then there was a gap at some point, and I went back through and I had a period, a couple of months where I didn't have anything scheduled. And I went back through because I never really gave up on that rodeo book. Yeah. But boy, it needed some work. And I went back through and I looked at all the rejections I'd gotten, and I was like, yeah, yeah. At the time, it was very painful to read those rejections, but, 5 years later, I'm like, right. Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I started tweeting about it, and she saw the tweets, and she was like, is that the rodeo book? I'd still like that. Oh. Okay, so we spent another year working on it because it was an earlier book, so it needed a lot of revision. Yeah. And then we went to, and then the schedule got changed, and they were like, I learned that there's a difference between a deadline and a drop dead date.
Okay.
Everybody knows what a deadline is, and sometimes in publishing you can push those suckers. A drop dead date means if you don't have it in by that date, it's dead.
Yeah.
And they were like, the drop dead date is 3 p.m. on Friday, and I went, and I was doing the final proof at 1:20 on Friday, and realized I found a typo. The chiseled planes of his face, and I was like, is that the Great Plains or the geometric planes? And I went to Twitter, and Twitter was like, it's the geometric planes, not grass. But
Right.
there's grass in the book, the Great Plains, not and I was like, ah! So yeah, that was how close and I turned it in with like 40 minutes to spare. It was terrifying.
So I need a little romance for dummies.
Yeah.
Harlequin is a publisher and not a style of book?
Yeah.
Are they just like such a big publisher that it has become like Kleenex for tissues? I thought Harlequin was
that's a good analogy. I love it.
Okay.
So it is the Kleenex of tissues.
Okay. So they're the publishing house, and is Desire a
Right. So like in our tissue analogy, Desires would be the tissues with aloe.
Okay.
So it's still a tissue.
Yeah.
It's still a Kleenex, but now we have our different, and then like the rodeo books, Rodeo Dreams and One Rodeo Season were published with, may it rest in peace, Super Romance, which would have been like the little square box ones that my grandma loved versus the super deluxe ones that we use in this house because snot is everywhere. So they have their different, their romantic suspense, intrigue line. Their special edition line is very popular. It's where a lot of cowboys are these days. They have their more inspirational lines that they use. Lines come, lines go.
Sure.
But yeah, they've one thing Harlequin has always been very good at is finding a market and then drilling down into it. So each line has what they call the reader promise, and Desires was always rich, powerful heroes and strong heroines, whereas romantic and suspense and intrigue would, that's where you'd find your cops and there maybe women on the run from a domestic situation, and different situations. So I wrote a lot more billionaire cowboys than probably exist in the world, but they were very popular. I loved them. That one series, the first family of rodeo, was definitely billionaire cowboys. How can I make these cowboys as rich as possible?
There's plenty. I mean, there are billionaire cowboys in Oklahoma and Colorado, Argentina. They're everywhere.
They are. So yeah, it was. They were a lot of fun. Every now and then they would ask me to do a book. They would give me the plot, and it would be like, really? But it was always a writing challenge. How could you pull off amnesia after being in a tornado? Which I did.
Wow.
I was like, well, all right, but the readers loved it. So, it was as long as you fulfilled the reader promise. And I think one of the things we see right now in romance is that there's been a really strong, when I first entered romance, even pre-publication, it was all about the naked male torso and how low you could go before you hit treasure trails and whatever. Right. And right now that has gone away completely almost. And now we're having this big major illustrated cover moment. My friends, Karen Booth, Adele Buck, Olivia Wilde, they all have amazing illustrated covers, and it works for them because they all have amazing rom-coms. I know Karen Booth is writing seasoned romance, Gray Hair Don't Care, and that's for her seasoned heroines, that's romance code for author or romance couples over 40 or over 50. So older Gen X people finding love again, I guess.
So you're saying it's possible.
It is.
It's possible.
In romance, anything is possible.
Right.
Billionaire cowboys on second chance romances with surprise secret babies while someone shifts into a wolf. It can be done.
Sign me up.
Yeah. And Adele is writing these wonderful books set in like community theater backgrounds, and so they're very rom-com. And Olivia is writing these amazing stories. is it Olivia Wilde or Olivia Dale? Oh, no, I don't want to mix up my Olivias.
Well, I think Olivia Wilde is... No, Olivia Munn is who John Mulaney left his wife for.
No, definitely not that one.
Okay. And not Oscar Wilde.
No. Although always hilarious, great at parties. I think, Olivia Wilde and or Olivia Dade. Okay. But one of the Olivias, I think it's Dade.
Olivia Dade wrote Spoiler Alert and Teach Me and All the Feels.
Yeah, that
okay.
one. Yeah.
Body rom-coms with a big...
heart, probably. Or lug.
Yes, a big heart. Yes.
Or a big lug. Both work. Sorry, Olivia. But those cartoon covers really work. But publishing has, is an industry. Authors often, we love money. Please give us more. Mm-hmm. But we all write because we love writing and we have trouble imagining doing anything else, even when we probably should, because again, carpal tunnel, etc.
Yeah.
But we all love it. And so publishing as a business, though, they're like, hey, these people are having really success with these cute little cartoon covers. And let's put it on everything. And then readers pick up those books expecting lighthearted rom-coms with, plucky heroines and, hilarious situations. And then they find a book where, that's not even a romance. And then they get pissy because that was a reader promise that was unfulfilled. Because you can judge a book by its cover.
Yeah. Wow.
I know a lot.
You've learned a lot. You know a lot. Yeah.
I don't even know everything. And that's a scary thing.
And then how did you decide? Because some books you publish under pen names and some you publish under your own name.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Sarah M. Anderson books, that is my real name. Mm-hmm. And I have a nickname, a family nickname, which I'll get to in a second. But at the time, when, the kid was 3, it made sense. I already had two names already in my life. And at the time, adding a third one on my existing 1.5 functioning brain cells seemed like a poor choice. Mm-hmm. In retrospect, I wouldn't have done it that way. First off, a middle initial is hellacious in metadata. When you go to fill out a form, when you do that for a driver's license, middle initial or middle name. But when you do that in Amazon's back end, there's no middle initial. And so some books that were originally published with Sam Hain, they didn't put the middle initial in at all, which meant that for various points, I would have multiple copies of my books listed everywhere.
Okay.
And it was a disaster. So I always tell people, do not use a middle name.
Good to know.
And then second off, it doesn't exactly provide a lot of privacy.
Right.
That was a thing. So when I wrote an erotica series that was set in post-Civil War Texas in a brothel. And that is a very different reader promise than the Harlequins were. And especially since I was still going into schools when I started these books, I wanted a little more distance between those two. So I chose Maggie Chase. And those books have done very well. And I really liked writing them. They were so different from the Harlequin books that I had a great time writing them. They were just a real vacation for my brain. But nobody knows who the heck Maggie Chase was. So after a while, we changed the cover. Sarah M. Anderson, writing as Maggie Chase. So now I'm revising what I hope will be my first YA book. I've written several, but that reader expectation that we talked about, trying to nail the voice for teens, even though I live with one and spend all my time with him. Oh, wow, that's harder than I expected. You never reach a point where you can't learn more in whatever you're doing. So while I know whole bunches about romance, A, I don't know everything about everything. And B, you go to just one slightly different department in publishing. I'm like, I have no clue.
Right.
So when it comes to YA, because my name is associated with more spicy books, especially, and then more and more spicy books once you get down to the Maggie Chase books, I wanted more of a clean break from that. So I chose my old nickname, Sally, and then I picked one of my grandmother's names for the last name, which is Saltzman. So this time the other problem, as I noted earlier, is that Sarah M. Anderson, do you know how many Sarahs there are in the world? This time I Googled everything. I had a list of possible names, all of my grandma's names, first, last, and I was like, one from column A, one from column B, Google it.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, no other Sally Saltzmans anywhere.
Yeah.
So that was, okay, that's what I'm gonna that's what I'm going to do.
Nice. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Oh God, thank goodness.
Interviewed Lee Matthew Goldberg, who does like thrillers and YA, and he publishes them all under the same name, but I can absolutely imagine the confusion of a YA reader who picks up one of his adult thrillers. I've never heard that phrase, you said the reader's promise.
Yeah.
That I've never heard it before, but it instantly makes so much sense.
Yeah, well, and it's like I said earlier, when it comes to my mom's books these days, if it's got a cat or a dog, some form of murder or death in the title, and a craft or a food product on the cover, that is an instantly recognizable promise to the reader as this is Leah Cozy Mystery you will like. Yeah. And I went into the library the other day and I just like a whole shelf into my bag for her because she doesn't get out very much. She's very vulnerable right now, and things are. And one of the librarians was like, "What you doing?"
I'm reshelving for you.
I'm like, just cleaning up some space for you, Tim. And he was like, so I told him, I was like, cat, murder, food, and he was like, "Oh wow, now that you mention it, I see those things everywhere." I'm like, yeah. I mean, it's what the readers look for. It's the promise that they want. So
yeah, I remember reading a mystery series where it was always like the cat had walked through the blood. I think it was a woman. What was it?
A lot of paw prints. Yeah.
A lot of paw prints. I'm sure Rain is now yelling at the phone, and maybe my mom too. It was a series, but it wasn't Dial M for Murder because that's not it. Okay. But I feel like it was another alphabetical series, but it was always about a cat. It was like the cat who blah-de-blah-de-blah.
Oh, I bet my mom has read that.
Yeah.
It sounds familiar. I'm sure Rain will be on Twitter like, you guys! Yeah. Feel free to let me know, Rain.
Yeah, she'll let us know. This is great. Honestly, I've read a little bit of Danielle Steele in the 90s when I was studying abroad, because Danielle Steele at the time is what was in Left Behind in Hostels.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then I am also in my post-grad school, and there's a pandemic. I can't read anymore.
Oh, I hear you.
I listen, and I think listening to books is reading.
It is.
But most of what I know about romance, I know from Jackie Cation, who's a stand-up comic who talks about them on her podcast a fair amount.
Oh, okay.
So what are your either recommendations for someone who hasn't read romance? Like, how do you even know how to start? There's so much. Or what are you did bring visual aids. So like, what are you reading? What are you recommending to people lately?
I go through phases, and I totally feel you on the pandemic. One of the things that I have done when, for the last couple of years, we just haven't gone out as much. And I went through, when the pandemic first started and our library shut down, I was like, I think the library's going to shut down, and took Mom in, and we cleared off shelves, and we book sat those books for about 6 months before we took them back. And I felt very proprietary for them. I'm like, okay, it's time for you to go back to where you belong. But it took me forever to read them because, it's just hard to sink into the story. This pandemic has been very hard on focus, I think. And so I have been listening to a lot of audiobooks, which is, we did audiobooks early and often when my kids started. When he was maybe 3 or 4, there was a commercial that had some Hawaiian phrases for a Hawaiian pineapple burger at Hardee's or something. And he started repeating the Hawaiian back to me. And I was like, okay, you are really listening. Let's go get some books. So we've always had listening and reading and talking about the books that we listen to together. And it also is the only way I can get through doing the dishes. I'll just be really honest. I don't enjoy that at all. But I've been listening to a couple of books. So it's hard to say like, oh, this is where you should start with romance, because there's so much, and romance can be so personal, and what is one person's yum is often another person's yuck. And the thing to start with romance is to find some people who read romance, and then read what they recommend. You don't have to like it.
Right.
In fact, it doesn't matter if you like it. If you hate it, then you can know that the next time they say, I loved this book, then you can say, I don't need to read that book.
Mm-hmm.
But if they say, this book didn't work for me, and you're like, but I loved it.
Yeah.
There are plenty of good friends out there on social media who know that their reading tastes are completely opposite. And they're like, I hated it, but this is the book for Linda. I've really been enjoying Kat Sebastian and KJ Charles, which write queer books. They've been some of my audiobook go-tos recently. KJ Charles' Will Darling Adventures are just wonderful. They're Roaring 20s, pre-World War I. He's still a Duke, but it's a different take on Dukes, because I was going to be a professor of Victorian literature. I'm not. But, going back and reading those British Dukes and Duchesses of any era, I mean, 1700s with Elizabeth Hoyt up to KJ Charles pre-World War I, those are my comfort reads. When I can't deal with anything else, I sink into those kinds of historicals. I've been reading Manda Collins, Harris's Guide to Deception and Desire. That's the one I'm on now. I always read Megan as well. But I also have been mixing it up because, the classic advice that always seems to just confound brand new writers is go read what you want to write. Yeah. And many people, they tend to kind of take that as like, a slap in the face. They're like, well, I'm too busy writing. And I will not lie that I said the same thing. But the truth is that, again, if you want to be published traditionally, then these are not necessarily your competitors, but these are what publishers are putting out. So they want to fulfill that reader promise. And so they want not the same thing, but they want something close enough. They want something they know how to sell. And if you are not comfortable with that, then that's where self-publishing is good. Tasha Harrison is a dear friend of mine on Twitter. She runs a group called Word Makers. And Tasha is all self-published because she doesn't want to write what the traditional publishing knows how to sell, but she has her own audience. She has her own reader promise and her own audience that she can meet that promise for. And that is amazing. Yeah. And it's great. Her books are very spicy and delightful. So Tasha Harrison's a great place to start. Like small town and spicy. I think her last one had, there's a very popular trope, falling in love with your best friend's sibling. I even wrote one, his best friend's sister. That was the title of it in the book. And Tasha wrote, she's like, I can do better. Tasha, oh gosh, I can't remember the title. I'm sorry, Tasha. But it was the falling in love with my best friend's mom. Woo. And it was like, spicy! Tasha Harrison, again, people, Tasha Harrison. Yeah. Check that one out. Sorry, I can't remember the title, Tasha. So, that's the kind of thing, like traditional publishing that you can go buy at a bookstore or on a grocery store shelves. They know how to sell best friend's sister. They don't know how to sell best friend's mom. Right. But Tasha knows. And so that's the great place.
Even though, honestly, best friend's mom, how many people saw... this would have been funny if I could have remembered the movie. Jason Schwartzman and the apple pie.
Oh, American Pie.
Oh, American Pie. Thank you. I was close.
The only title of Tasha. Yeah. Or else Stacy's mom has got it going on too. Yeah. Oh, so many Stacys. But maybe it was Tasha Harrison's The Truth Duet. I'm not sure. But Tasha Harrison, everyone. Okay. But then I've also been reading, so I've been writing in YA and it's always been easier for me to read YA fantasy. So like I just finished Alana Gray's Beast of Prey, which is coming to TV soon. Or however soon translates to in production terms, so sometime in the next 5 years. But Beast of Prey, a sprawling African-based epic, wonderful book. But I've also been reading more contemporary romances as well. So I just finished, like 2 weeks ago, Fat Chance Charlie Vega by Crystal Maldonado. Okay, that's probably not how you pronounce her last name. Sorry, Crystal. But I really liked that one. It was a straight up romance. It was wonderful. I mean, high school, but it was also really focused on Charlie is a heavy girl, and so it was focused on how she deals with being a larger girl in a world that's not always welcoming with that. How it is to finally get your first kiss from a boy when you didn't ever think you would find anyone who would see you for yourself.
Right.
And I was never a petite, delicate flower.
Yeah.
That was never in the cards for me. So, when I read YA romance like that, it's always really important for me as a currently 45-year-old woman to remember that I am not the market for that. Because sometimes when I read books like that, I'd be like, oh, honey, what are you doing now? But, for the teen in me, like, oh, yeah, back when I was a teen. Yep,
right.
Yeah. Yep. And so I thought that Fat Chance Charlie Vega was a great book for that. And she just had, like, Tuesday. Is today Thursday? Recently.
Thursday, yeah.
Yeah. She just released No Filters and Other Lies was her next book. And so that's on my to-do list. And right now I'm listening to, because I'm one of those weirdos who I have the book that I read in the
You're able to
evening.
parallel path books.
And then I have the audiobook that I'm for doing the dishes. So right now I'm listening to Rise to the Sun by Leah Johnson, which is her second one. So she writes African-American queer YA books. Her first one, You Should See Me in a Crown, was all about the queer black girl getting on homecoming court.
Wow.
And it was a freaking fracking delight. I just had a great time with it. So I was like, yes, Rise to the Sun, which is about two girls meeting at a music festival.
Yeah.
And it's still a straight up romance because, romance, one of the things that romance does better than any genre, whether it's YA or adult, is that there's internal conflict and external conflict.
Okay.
And so, the external conflict is like, the will says that if I don't get married, I can't get my inheritance, or the external conflict, my brother is getting married and if I don't show up with a date, so I need a fake date. Or the external conflict is, oh no, it's a blizzard and there's only one bed.
Right.
Plenty of external conflict.
Yes.
We love the mix and match your external conflict. And then the internal conflict is like, I had this goal where I'm going to be the youngest CEO ever, but then I met this person and now I don't think that's the same goal that I had, or it's not the same envisionment. So, in Rise to the Sun, one of the characters whose name I've already forgotten. Sorry, Leah. So many Leahs.
So many Leahs. We're everywhere now.
I know.
We're taking over.
I'm sure you do know, but, back when we were kids, you go into the souvenir shop and...
There were no Leahs.
No Leahs. Plenty of Sarahs. Never
Plenty
a
of
Leah.
Sarahs.
Never.
When I went to New York for the first time, we were 16 when we went to New York for the first time. Leah is a very Jewish name, very New York, very New Jersey, and it was on everything in New York. It was so exciting. So exciting. Yeah. I mean, Rain, when we were kids, her name was on everything. Every version of her name and nickname was available, but mine not until I got to New York. So I bought a New York license plate that said Leah, like a mini one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Everybody had those on bikes. I don't know if kids, I don't know.
I don't know.
My kid can't stay upright on bikes, skates. He's okay on a scooter, but we don't. So if you're looking for romance suggestions for Valentine's Day, this is my official romance pitch. If you're reading YA, I recommend Crystal Maldonado. Sorry, Crystal. But Fat Chance Charlie Vega or No Filter and Other Lies. Leah Johnson's book, You Should See Me in a Crown, Rise to the Sun. I'm really excited about Emery Lee's books. They wrote Meet Cute Diary, and they have a new one coming out, Cafe Con Lychee. They just wanted to write books about fun, cute, queer people having rom-com adventures instead of having, traumatic coming out stories or whatever. They were like, I just want fun, cute stories. Yeah. And I'm like, I love it. So those are my recommendations in YA. If people want to read Across the Rainbow, KJ Charles, Cat Sebastian, those are what I'm currently listening to. Tasha Harrison and super spicy contemporaries. Megan Frampton, Amanda Collins are writing Great Dukes. More seasoned romance, Karen Booth with Gray Hair Don't Care. And sorry, Karen, I forgot the one that literally just came out. There's only so many brain cells that work, I'm telling you.
Here's the thing. I supplement your brain cells with Google when I do the show notes.
Thank God.
Yeah.
And then Adele Buck's acting up or acting out or acting in. Adele is acting. Very excited about that. And then a bunch of Olivias are all writing wonderful things. Mm-hmm. I just always don't know which ones are which.
Olivia Dade.
Olivia Dade is writing the contemporary, and Olivia Wilde or Waits is writing the historicals, and those are great too.
Wonderful.
The stories that often got kind of brushed out of the margins in, more traditional publishing are now really getting to see the light and being told by some really wonderful storytellers. And I think that's really exciting.
Well, I think one of the things that's remarkable to me about romance and cozy mysteries in particular is how fast those markets move.
Oh, yeah.
And how fast they're publishing, and just the speed at which, once you know the beats you're supposed to hit, you can get into a rhythm of writing them.
Yeah. I mean, I could turn out, I never want to at any time imply that I was writing the same book over and over again. They were all different. Everyone was a struggle. Some of them were awful. A few of them were great. But in all of those books that I turned in to the same editor at Harlequin, I only had 2 that ever came back with yep, that's good. I mean, 2.
Wow.
Yeah. There was one book that I turned in and I said, it was an assigned book. And so I was working with a plot that I hadn't come up with. But there was one book where I turned it in and I said, this book is terrible and I don't know how to fix it. Mm-hmm. And they said, oh, surely it's not that. Oh, dear. Oh, no. Oh, no. And so Stacy called me. She's like, we got to talk about this. And so we talked for 2.5 hours. And I said, because it was an assigned book and it fit into a larger series. And so I couldn't just do whatever I wanted. Yeah. And finally I said, was that the Amnesia book? That was the Amnesia book. Oh, God, the Amnesia book. I have written an Amnesia book. But so she had run away with him, but in the original story, she didn't want to marry him if her daddy couldn't walk her down the aisle. But now they were on the verge of breaking up, but then there was a tornado and some amnesia, and she couldn't remember that she didn't want to and also a baby. She was pregnant when the tornado hit, and she got amnesia and a baby.
It's so much.
Yeah, it's a lot. And so I wrote the story that they requested, and then I turned it in, and we all went, oh no, oh no. And finally, it was to the point where it could have ended a career. It was so bad. Yeah. And finally I said the only way I could tell a different story is as if they actually got married, and she asked for a divorce, and she can't remember that. And she went, that sounds great, write it. And I wrote it in 9 days.
Wow.
9 days, 6 a.m. in the office and not leaving until about 10 p.m. at night. And I took one day off to go on a school field trip for 3rd grade, but that was I kept one scene out of the original book that was a baby shower, and the rest of it was all new. And so, some books are easy, and some books, you lose hair over.
Was the second time you wrote that book easier because you had figured out the big twist?
Yeah, because everyone's got, their own inside jokes and colloquialisms, and my dad was a dad of many fine sayings, let me tell you, and one of his classics that remains more true every day I walk on this earth is, I have done it all the wrong ways. I am telling you the right way. Which was really irritating when you're 12. You're like, okay, I'm just trying to crush the cans, but if you want to do it your way, have a good time.
Right.
True story. But now that I'm,
Well, you got to dent him a little before you...
I know. Well, yeah, sometimes it wasn't bad when he busted that out, because then he'd get so involved in showing me the right way that I'd just have a good time.
Oh, yeah. That's when you're like Mark Twain that fence.
But now that I'm writing, sometimes you got to write it all the wrong ways before you figure out the right way. And it's really tempting to see that as irritating or wasted, but it's not, as long as you look at everything that you do is part of the learning process.
Right.
What is it? There's that one phrase, I think it's a Miranda Lambert song, where it's just like, if you can't be a lesson, be a warning.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have to look at a book like that.
Right.
But everything, you can take something away from every book, every experience that you do, like, okay, maybe I should definitely wear under eye concealer next time, just for my own mental health and well-being. But, everything that you do has a lesson to move forward with. So even when the book that I'm working on now, that I thought I would already have out, Querying with Agents, or someone throwing money at me for, no, yeah. I'm in the second rewrite of it again. But, I 2/3 of the way through the first rewrite and then realized I still had a gaping plot hole at the beginning.
Whoops.
But that was a very quick, oh, okay, no, okay, and zip, off we go.
Nice.
So, once you do it the wrong way, you're like, well, that eliminated that one. Then the right way, you start to see the path forward a lot better.
Yeah. Oh, so fun.
I try.
It's so fun. It was during the pandemic, so I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. Truly no idea.
Time and space have lost all meaning. Go on.
Lost all meaning. I have been trying my hand a little bit at the Hallmark Christmas rom-com 13-act screenplay.
Oh.
Because you can go online and it's really, you meet the heroine. She, it's like there's these 13 moments in the movie. There's she meets the guy, they hate each other. Mm-hmm. There's the montage, the Christmas montage where they fall in love. Then there's the almost kiss. Then there's the conflict. Then there's right?
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to try and write around those beats, but that's the promise, right? Is that, right. And that's why those types of movies are so popular and comfortable is, you know what's coming, but you don't know how it's coming, maybe.
Right. I mean, and people always dump on romance because they're like, it's always got a happily ever after. It's literally the only promise it makes as a genre. I've won 3 awards. I had to count. It's again, I'm down to my last brain cell and a half here. I've won many of the major awards in our industry. Several of them don't exist anymore, but I won them when they did. And some of those books were batshit crazy. The one that I won the most recent one was at the beginning of the pandemic. It came out in 2019, so it won the 2020 Booksellers Best Award.
Yeah.
For Seduction on His Terms. And I wrote it as a contemporary American duke. I mean, obviously he's the son of a billionaire,
right?
But the way he acts, the way he reacts to his father, because there's when you read a bunch of dukes, one of a very, very common duke trope in duke stories is my duke father, that I will one day inherit my title from, is an absolutely terrible human being, and the line ends with me. Mm-hmm. I shall not reproduce. The dukedom will return to the crown. It ends with me. And I wrote the American contemporary version of that with a terrible duke, because you read some of those duke stories and you're like, boy, that duke is a terrible father. So I wrote the American version of that. And they gave me a Glass Award for that. Nice. I liked it. But it was one of those things where it's like, I had been told early on that there were several things you couldn't do. You couldn't tie up a desire hero. Desire heroes are the ones tying people up.
Okay.
And the book that I won a Rita for, which was The Nanny Plan, I made him a virgin. I made the hero a virgin, and they're like, can't do that. Gotta be in control in the bedroom.
Right.
And the day after it came out, one of the Desire editors, not mine, but one of the Desire editors was like, I think it's time for a Desire virgin. I was like, I gave you a Desire virgin, and you made me put in an evil ex-girlfriend. And and then the veins begin to pulse on my forehead. The eyelid twitch starts.
Did they at least give you the virgin hero?
No!
Oh, that's not fair.
No, they took him away. He had to have an evil ex an experience. And fine. So, but in seduction on his terms, I was like, I'm tying this one to the bedpost, and I dare you to make me take it out. I mean, it was one of those unspoken rules that it's okay if a heroine has had a traumatic sexual past event,
right?
But heroes are not. I'm like, I think we're going to turn that one around on this one, and she's going to heal him. And the readers were like, I've never seen it. I kind of liked that. It was nice. Ooh. And then at the end, she says, I'll be with you, but you got to go to therapy because I'm not curing you. I mean, she literally says that in the book, like, love does not cure all, and you have some issues, which he did. He had major issues.
Right.
Like this was not, a baby log was not going to cure this one.
Right.
And he goes, no, I think you're right. I think I should probably actually talk to someone. And that was kind of bold to put into Harlequin, and I was like, do what I want. So fantastic. But all the other stuff that was promised by that Harlequin, which is the rich, powerful hero and a heroine who doesn't take crap from anyone,
right?
And all of that stuff that Harlequin promises was still the main focus of that book.
Yeah.
And another funny story about that book. So Adele Buck, my friend, who writes Acting Up, and you should check it out, cute cartoon covers. But so I sent it to her to read, and it's not quite her kind of book, but she gave me a lovely little blurb for it. And she's like, and it's a lovely Beauty and the Beast retelling. And I went, what? It's a what? She's like, it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, isn't it? I'm like, is it? She's like, he's even got the library, Sarah. The library? You didn't? I was like, it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling! I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm a trained professional. So
yeah, but that Beauty and the Beast for women our age, that original animated one is like, put it in my veins.
Foundational.
Yeah. It was our sophomore year marching band show. Like that, I've seen that movie so many times.
My kid just got back from band, so yeah.
Yeah.
They did this year, they did Phantom of the Opera and wheeled out a giant chandelier, and it was great. The last time they had marching band before this year, they did not Phantom, that was this year, pay attention. They did Les Miserables, and yeah, that was great. They had a bunch of drunken flags mastering of the house all over the place. I really recommended that one. That was great.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Wonderful.
I love a good Andrew Lloyd Webber marching band show.
I know. My son's like, can't we do Metallica next? No, Mom's singing show tunes again.
I only knew Miss Saigon through halftime shows.
Oh, I can see that, yeah.
And when they restaged it and did the tour this year, I went to see it, and I was like, and I left at intermission because I was like, the marching band show does not appear to be so racist. You don't get the context. It's not subtext. And in the marching band show, and I was just like, I can't deal with this, and I left. Even though I wanted to see the helicopter, how they did the helicopter, but I was just like, I can't watch this show anymore. But it is a great marching band show.
I can see that.
It's a little less racist on the field.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sometimes those older things, and you're like, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. And my kid hates that because I'm like, oh, this is foundational. You should. Oh, but we got to talk about that. He's like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm like, oh, but we're going to talk about it anyway. And he's like,
Yeah. Sarah, this has been a blast.
Oh, thank God.
Where can people find you on the internet if you want to be found?
I am on Twitter most of the time. Sarah M. Anderson 1 is my Twitter handle. I'm also there as Sally Saltzman if you just can't get enough of me for some reason. I don't know. There's not a whole bunch of difference between the two. Pets pop up on both of them. I have 2 dogs. One of them is a grouchy old fart who's very quiet. He's been in the room the whole time. Mm-hmm. And the other one is an exuberant beagle who never shuts up. bless his adore. He's very cute. It's the only reason he's still alive. So yeah, I mean, if you enjoy that sort of stuff, I'm on Twitter. I have a website, sarahanderson.com. It has all of the books. It has book lists with books in order. It has links. Obviously, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, indie bookstores can usually get my stuff printed in. I'm about to have 2 audiobooks come out through Scribed sometime this year. One is a self-published novella, The Christmas Pony, so one assumes that would be closer to the next holiday season. Mm-hmm. And the other one is a brand new book that hasn't been published yet that's going to be in audio first at Scribed. So that's exciting.
That is really cool. A
little bit different. It involves some demons.
Okay.
And some murder. So,
so is not a romance.
It accidentally is.
Okay.
I wasn't trying to write a romance, but I couldn't stop it from leaking in. It's like snow, water in shoes right now because I'm in Illinois and there's still so much snow on the ground. Yeah, but it was like, it wound up with a happy ending. I couldn't help it. I was like, well, here we are. Yeah. Look at them living a happy life now that the demon has been vanquished. All right, go team.
Did you get to... Who picks the voice actor? Do you get a say in that, or?
I think I do. We're still in the early process, which is why things will both probably be out later this year. But I'm excited about them. I've had a couple of audiobooks done for the Maggie Chase erotica books, and I did work with that narrator specifically, Anne. Whose last name I've already forgotten. Sorry, Anne. I used to be, you would never know, but like in my teens, I was really good with names. Not anymore. Anne Randall, I think. Great narrator. Really enjoyed working with her. And but for Scribed, they have their own processes and their own stable of narrators. So I'm really looking forward to working with them and on the whole process about how that works.
Very fun. Yeah.
And of course, all of my books are at libraries. Please go to the library. Support your library and support your librarians. And please wear a mask while you're doing it.
Yes.
For your
wear a mask. Sake. Are they available on the Libby app? Are there electronic copies available? Great.
Yes. And on Hoopla. I do know. I know that the audio, those 3 audiobooks are on Hoopla as well, but they should be on both Libby, Overdrive, and Hoopla, which is not a both. That's an all. So
yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of libraries. Always have been. When people are like, I can't afford, just go to the library.
Go to the library, yeah.
I love the libraries. Everybody loves libraries. Go team.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.